My second David Ayer movie, having only previously seen Suicide Squad, I wasn't sure what to expect going into this, but it stars Jason Statham, and that was pretty much enough to get me on board.
Buddy, I'm counting to 3.
1, 2, 3. There, I did it for you.
The film follows Statham playing a character called Adam Clay, a beekeeper, which means more than just actually looking after bees, although he does also do that. It's a very simple movie, and definitely amongst the wave of like John Wick-esque movies. And there are a lot of comparisons that could be made between this and that first John Wick movie. Beekeepers being this organisation that stand like outside the law, outside of the system. Very similar to the High Table in the John Wick series. And then we have a character who goes on like this solo mission after someone that he cares about ends up dead. But this film, whilst it is undoubtedly like inspired by that and riding that wave a little bit, it is different in its own way enough to make me appreciate this on its own. This film has much more of a grunge feel to it that I both like and I don't. I think it works tonally, I just visually don't really love the colour palette the movie goes with. It ends up at times where there are moments where it looks a little bit more graphic, but the colour palette almost acts like it's trying to hide it, as if they're trying to sneak through extra blood through like the ratings and stuff, and it just felt a bit strange. Because there are moments where there's quite a lot of blood fucking flying everywhere, but like the lighting seems to hide it a little bit, and it's a bit strange. It feels like it doesn't decide whether it wants to go fully into that like gore. And like I say, I think the grunge feel works tonally. I didn't love it visually at all times. Mentioning that person who dies at the start of the movie, it's a really strong anchor, I found actually. We don't get to know the character too well, but we know enough, and we know her connection to Grey, and it would have been nice to see a little bit more of that. But it's a movie that goes at a pretty quick pace, so as nice as it would have been to explore that connection a little bit more, I'm not too mad that it doesn't, because I still understood and felt the motivation that it provided for Grey going through the rest of the movie. The mystery of what the Beekeepers actually are is also really well built up, and I do like how they present this organisation. Anytime it's mentioned, there's a certain aura to the scenes, and it feels like this deadly higher power that could fuck you up. Just incredibly deadly, and despite lying so low and being so hidden, it still has more than enough power to do everything it needs to do. I think what makes this film stand out a little bit more, and not just ending up like a less interesting John Wick, is that it's got a bit of sense of humour to it. I know the Wick movies do at some points as well, but I mean, this film is not taking itself too seriously, which may sound weird saying that it goes for a bit of a grunge feel, and I think that does work. But like, there's just some really great bits throughout the whole movie. The detectives are pretty funny, I enjoyed them. They did drag down the plot a little bit, like every time we cut to them, I would just want to get back to the stuff with Grey, but it is what it is. It wasn't like particularly bad or anything, it was just less interesting. But it breaks up the movie's pacing effectively for me, and it all comes together quite well towards the end. And then Statham just has some really great moments of just being really funny. Like, the deadpan delivery is perfect. There's one point where Statham is just like stapling this guy like so casually, and it is hilarious. Like, he just comes off as this dude who really can't be arsed with all of this shit, like as if everyone in his way is just a slight nuisance, and he just is fed up with it and wants it over as soon as possible. Later on in the film, the Beekeepers send off an assassin to take out Clay because he's been making a lot of noise, and obviously it fails. Clay kills her, and the following scene is just one of those members of the Beekeepers on the phone being like, yeah, after that, we're gonna stay neutral and not get involved, and I thought that was hilarious. The antagonists of the movie are also pretty entertaining. Josh Hutcherson plays a snobby rich boy so well. He's just utterly unlikable in a really enjoyable way. They bring another kind of element of comedy, like they're comedically over the top annoying, but that feels like the kind of intent, and that feels like the portrayal of these people. They all feel like Leonardo DiCaprio's Jordan Belfort from The Wolf of Wall Street.
I'm not fucking leaving!
But as with all the people working under Hutcherson's character, they're all infuriating to watch, and Hutcherson's character can't remember his name, but he's at the top of that ladder, essentially, of all these fucking shitheads, bringing in all the money with lots of different company buildings, with scams, and taking innocent people's money, which is what happens at the start of the movie that leads to Mrs. Parker's death. She is scammed and loses all her money and ends up taking her own life. And as I mentioned earlier, I found that a really strong anchor, and also because she's the mom of the main detective that we're following, it really does make us want to see these rich assholes ripped apart from top to bottom. The film runs into the problem, though, of the further Gray goes on in his rampage and the more drastic things that happen, the motivations for why he's trying to climb this ladder do end up feeling a little muddled. We have his emotional motivation from the start of the film, which is obviously, as I have said, I feel like it works. And we know the Beekeepers work outside the government and try to return balance within the system if there's ever unbalance. But Gray's motivations specifically get a little muddled because of the fact that he's also been retired for a few years now, so it's like he's really going out of his way and going hard on all of this. The action is obviously a major part and is great. It's executed in a really fun way, and I really don't have anything to complain about. There's one scene where I thought it was a little unbelievable that he'd take on all the guys that he was surrounded by, and in the final act, as he's just wandering around without any real disguise on, it does push your suspension of disbelief a little bit with whether he's actually going to last long enough to execute his plan before getting shot in the head. But with the tone this movie goes for, and the way it has more fun with itself than anything, it didn't bother me. It's got a pretty grounded and gritty feel to everything happening, but is also having fun with itself at the same time, and it's not trying to be hyper realistic. Nonetheless, it's a really entertaining movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and whilst it's nothing incredible, and it is a little generic, and you really are getting what you expect, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's still a great time.